Hello, 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 hello. Welcome to part 28, is that right? Of Project 2025, read by Douglas Wayne Ricketts. I have not looked ahead on the next segment, so I don't know if this is going to tick me off, but based on the title, I think it's going to. We're on page 334 of this 920-page PDF. This section is titled, Return to the Original Purpose of School Meals. Just like the last few episodes, it's a gorgeous day here in LA. It's about 74, which is perfect for a former Alaskan like me. So I'm saving air conditioning money and have the window open. You might hear some birdies, maybe a couple jets flying overhead. It seems to be that kind of day. Oh, and the neighbors are cooking, so if you hear silverware, that's not me. Today's concoction is mango, beet powder, banana with ice and scotch. Yum, yum. And here we go. Return to the original purpose of school meals. Federal meal programs for K through 12 students were created to provide food to children from low-income families while at school. Today, however, federal school meals increasingly resemble entitlement programs that have strayed far from their original objective and represent an example of the ever-expanding federal footprint in local school operations. The NSLP and SBP are the two largest K through 12 meal programs provided by federal taxpayer money. The NSLP launched in 1946 and the SBP in 1966, both as options specifically for children in poverty. During the COVID-19 pandemic, federal policymakers temporarily expanded access to school meal programs, but some lawmakers and federal officials have now proposed making this expansion permanent. Yet even before the pandemic, research found that federal officials had already expanded these programs to serve children from upper-income homes, and these programs are rife with improper payments and inefficiencies. Heritage Foundation research from 2019 found that after the enactment of the Community Eligibility Provision, CEP, in 2010, the share of students from middle and upper-income homes receiving free meals in states that participated in CEP doubled, and in some cases, tripled, all in a program meant for children from families with incomes at or below 185% of the federal poverty line. Children from homes at or below 130% of the federal poverty line are eligible for free lunches, while students from families at or below 185% of poverty are eligible for reduced-priced lunches. Under CEP, if 40% of students in a school or school district are eligible for federal meals, all students in that school or district can receive free meals. However, the USDA has taken it even further, improperly interpreting the law to allow a subset of schools within a district to be grouped together to reach the 40% threshold. As a result, a school with 0 low-income students could be grouped together with schools with high levels of low-income students, and as a result, all the students in the schools within that group, even schools without a single low-income student, can receive free federal meals. Schools can direct resources meant for students in poverty to children from wealthier families. Furthermore, the NSLP and SBP are among the most inaccurate federal programs, according to PaymentAccuracy.gov, a project of the U.S. Office of Management and Budget and Office of the Inspector General. Before federal auditors reduced the rigor of annual reporting requirements in 2018, the NSLP had wasted nearly $2 billion in taxpayer resources through payments provided to ineligible recipients. Even after the auditing changes, which the U.S. Government Accountability Office said results in the USDA not regularly assessing the program's fraud risks, the NSLP wasted nearly $500 million in fiscal year 2021. The SBP now wastes nearly $200 million annually. It's a waste to feed our children and make our nation smart, healthy, and strong. It's a complete waste. Despite the ongoing effort to expand school meals under CEP and the evidence of waste and inefficiency, left-of-center members of Congress and President Biden's administration have nonetheless proposed further expansions to to extend federal school meals to include every K-12 student, regardless of need. The administration recently proposed expanding federal school meal programs offered during the school year to be offered during the summer as part of the American Families Plan, and also proposed expanding CEP. Other federal officials, including Senator Bernie Sanders, independent from Vermont, have in recent years proposed expanding the NSLP to all students. To serve students in need and prevent the misuse of taxpayer money, the next administration should focus on students in need and reject efforts to transform federal school meals into an entitlement program. Specifically, the next administration should promulgate a rule properly interpreting CEP. The USDA should issue a rule that clarifies that only an individual school or a school district as a whole, not a subset of schools within a district, must meet the 40% criteria to be eligible for CEP. Education officials should be prohibited from grouping schools together. Work with lawmakers to eliminate CEP. The NSLP and SBP should be directed to serve children in need, not become an entitlement for students from middle and upper income homes. Congress should eliminate CEP. Further, the USDA should not provide meals to students during the summer unless students are taking summer school classes. Currently, students can get meals from schools even if they are not in summer school, which has, in effect, turned school meals into a federal catering program. Restore programs to their original intent and reject efforts to create universal free school meals. The USDA should work with lawmakers to restore NSLP and SBP to their original goal of providing food to K-12 students who otherwise would not have food to eat while at school. Federal school meals should be focused on children in need, and any efforts to expand student eligibility for federal school meals to include all K-12 students should be soundly rejected. Such expansion would allow an inefficient, wasteful program to grow, magnifying the amount of wasted taxpayer resources. Reform conservation programs. Farmers in general are excellent stewards of the land, if not for moral or ethical considerations, then out of self-interest to make sure their land and, by extension, their livelihoods remain intact. Farmers are often called the original conservationists. When evaluating federal conservation programs, it is important to remember the importance of the land to farmers. In terms of USDA federal conservation programs, both the USDA's Farm Service Agency, FSA, and Natural Resources Conservation Services, NRCS, oversee numerous programs. As a general matter, the next administration should ensure that these programs address genuine and specific environmental concerns with a focus on currently existing environmental problems, not those that are speculative in nature. These conservation programs should have clearly identifiable goals, with the success or failure of these programs being directly measurable. Any assistance to farmers to take specific actions should not be provided unless the assistance will directly and clearly help to address a specific environmental problem. Further, any assistance to encourage farmers to engage in certain practices should only be provided if farmers would not have adopted the practices in the first place. There are specific issues that the next administration should address. The Conservation Reserve Program, which is run by FSA, pays farmers to not farm some of their land. This program has recently received attention as agricultural groups rightfully seek to farm without penalty voluntarily idled land, in light of the consequences to food prices of Russia invading Ukraine. There is also a need to reform USDA's conservation easements. These easements are a powerful tool to incentivize long-term preservation of ecosystems while still allowing farmers to benefit economically. However, when farmers and ranchers sign conservation easements with the USDA, they can be enforced in perpetuity. Future generations, be they the descendants of the landowner or new residents, are bound by those conditions. Ecosystems and topography naturally change over time, but without legislative change, easement requirements will not. The next administration should champion the elimination of the Conservation Reserve Program. Farmers should not be paid in such a sweeping way not to farm their land. If there is a desire to ensure that extremely sensitive land is not farmed, This should be addressed through targeted efforts that are clearly connected to addressing a specific and concrete environmental harm. The USDA should work with Congress to eliminate this overbroad program. Reform NRCS wetlands and erodible land compliance and appeals. Problematic NRCS overreach could be avoided entirely by removing its authority to prescribe specific practices on a particular farm operation in order to ensure continued eligibility to participate in USDA farm programs, and to require instead that each farm, as a function of eligibility, must have created a general best practices plan. Such a plan could be approved by the local county Soil and Water Conservation District, SWCD. The local SWCD commissioners are elected by their peers in each respective county and are better suited than the NRCS to provide guidance for farm operations in their respective jurisdictions. At a minimum, a new administration should support legislation to divest more power to the states, and possibly local SWCDs, regarding erodible land and wetlands conservation. Reform easements. The new administration should, to the extent authorized by law, limit the use of permanent easements and collaborate with lawmakers to prohibit the USDA from creating new permanent easements. Other major issues and specific recommendations. Although the following issues have not been listed as priority, these issues are still extremely important, and the next administration should address them. Only meat and poultry from federally inspected facilities can be sold in interstate commerce. Even meat and poultry from USDA-approved state-inspected facilities may only be sold in intrastate commerce, with limited exceptions. This is despite the fact that states with USDA-approved inspection programs must meet and enforce requirements that are at least equal to those imposed under the Federal Meat and Poultry Products Inspection Acts and the Humane Methods of Slaughter Act of 1978. This is an unnecessary regulatory barrier that makes it difficult to get meat and poultry into interstate commerce to create more options for consumers and farmers. Legislation entitled the New Markets for State-Inspected Meat and Poultry Act of 2021 would help to remove this obstacle. The next administration should promote legislation that would allow state-inspected meat to be sold in interstate commerce. These barriers to the sale of meat and poultry from USDA-approved state-inspected facilities should be removed. Eliminate or reform marketing orders and checkoff programs. Marketing orders and checkoff programs for agricultural commodities are similar in many ways. They both allow private actors within an industry to collaborate with the federal government to compel other competitors within an industry to fund their respective marketing order or checkoff program. There are currently 22 checkoff programs, and they focus on research and promotion of commodities such as beef and eggs. Marketing orders cover research and promotion, but also cover issues such as quality regulations and volume controls. The latter issue, volume controls, is a means to restrict supply, which drives up prices for consumers. Yeah, because we haven't had a problem with that lately. Fortunately, there are a few active volume controls. Marketing orders and checkoff programs are some of the most egregious programs run by the USDA. They are, in effect, a tax, a means to compel speech, and government-blessed cartels. Instead of getting private cooperation, they are tools for industry actors to work with government to force cooperation. The next administration should reduce the number and scope of marketing orders and checkoff programs. The USDA should reject any new requests for marketing orders and checkoff programs to the extent authorized by law, and eliminate existing programs when possible. While the programs work differently, there are often petition processes and other ways that make it difficult for affected parties to get rid of the marketing orders and checkoff programs, and the USDA itself may not even be required to honor requests to terminate a program. The USDA should make the process easier. Further, the USDA should reject any effort to bring back volume controls to limit supplies of commodities. Work with Congress to eliminate marketing orders and checkoff programs. These programs should be eliminated, and if industry actors want to collaborate, they should do so through private means, not using the government to compel cooperation. Promote legislation that would require regular votes. There should be regular voting for parties subject to checkoff programs and marketing orders. For example, the voting should occur at least every 5 years to determine whether a marketing order or checkoff program should continue. The USDA should be required to honor the results of such a vote. Through regular voting, parties can demonstrate their support for a marketing order or checkoff program and ensure that those administering them will be held accountable. Focus on trade policy, not trade promotion. The USDA's Foreign Agricultural Service, FAS, covers numerous issues, including trade policy, which is a reference to removing trade barriers, among other things, to ensure an environment conducive to trade. It also covers trade promotion. This includes programs like the Market Access Program that subsidizes trade associations, businesses, and other private entities to market and promote their products overseas. FAS should play a proactive and leading role to help open up markets for American farmers and ranchers. There are numerous barriers, such as sanitary and phytosanitary measures, blocking American agricultural products from gaining access to foreign markets. However, FAS should not help businesses and industries promote their exports, something these businesses and industries can and should do on their own. Businesses and industries should promote their own exports. Do these people not realize that the reason the government got involved in the first place is because government programs which bring everybody under an umbrella to promote American goods helps the national GDP overall? Do they just not understand that? Seems to me they don't understand that. The next administration should push legislation to repeal export promotion programs. The USDA should work with Congress to repeal market development programs like the Market Access Program and similar programs. Remove obstacles for agricultural biotechnology. Innovation is critical to agricultural production and the ability to meet future food needs. The next administration should embrace innovation and technology, not hinder its use, especially because of scare tactics that ignore sound science. One of the key innovations in agriculture is genetic engineering. According to the USDA, currently, over 90% of U.S. corn, upland cotton, and soybeans are produced using GE, genetically engineered varieties. Despite the importance of agricultural biotechnology, in 2016, Congress passed a federal mandate to label genetically engineered food. This legislation was arguably just a means to try to provide a negative connotation to GE food. There are other challenges as well for agricultural biotechnology. For example, Mexico plans to ban the importation of U.S. genetically modified yellow corn. The next administration should counter scare tactics and remove obstacles. The USDA should strongly counter scare tactics regarding agricultural biotechnology and adopt policies to remove unnecessary barriers to approvals and the adoption of biotechnology. Repeal the federal labeling mandate. The USDA should work with Congress to repeal the federal labeling law while maintaining federal preemption and stress that voluntary labeling is allowed. I'm sorry, no. People need to know what they're eating. If I decide I don't like genetically modified garbanzo beans, I won't buy them if I see them in the store. That's just wrong. Use all tools available to remove improper trade barriers against agricultural biotechnology. The USDA should work closely with the Office of the United States Trade Representative to remove improper barriers imposed by other countries to block U.S. agricultural goods. Reform Forest Service wildfire management. We're done with food, I guess. The United States Forest Service is one of 4 federal government land management agencies that administer 606 million acres, or 95% of the 640 million acres of surface land area managed by the federal government. Located within the USDA, the Forest Service manages the National Forest System, which is comprised of 193 million acres. As explained by the USDA Forest Service's mission is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands to meet the needs of present and future generations. The Forest Service should focus on proactive management of the forests and grasslands that does not depend heavily on burning. There should be resilient forests and grasslands in the wake of management actions. Wildfires have become a primary vegetation management regime for national forests and grasslands. Recognizing the need for vegetation management, the Forest Service has adopted pyrosilviculture, using unplanned fire, such as unplanned human-caused fires, to otherwise accomplish vegetation management. The Forest Service should instead be focusing on addressing the precipitous annual amassing of biomass in the national forests that drive the behavior of wildfire by thinning trees, removing live fuels and deadwood, and taking other preventative steps. The Forest Service can help to minimize the consequences of wildfires. Increasing timber sales could also play an important role in the effort to change the behavior of wildfire, because there would be less biomass. Timber sales and timber harvested in public forests dropped precipitously in the early 1990s and still remain very low. For example, in 1988, the volume of timber sold and harvested by volume was about 11 billion and 12.6 billion board feet, BBF, respectively. In 2021, timber sold was 2.8 BBF, and timber harvested was 2.4 BBF. In 2018, President Donald Trump issued Executive Order 13855 to, among other things, promote active management of forests and reduce wildfire risks. The executive order stated active management of vegetation is needed to treat these dangerous conditions on federal lands, but is often delayed due to challenges associated with regulatory analysis and current consultation requirements. It further explained the need to reduce regulatory obstacles to fuel reduction in forests created by the National Environmental Policy Act and the Endangered Species Act. The next administration should champion executive action consistent with law and proactive legislation to reduce wildfires. This would involve embracing Executive Order 13855, building upon it, and working with lawmakers to promote active management of vegetation, reduce regulatory obstacles to reducing fuel buildup, and increase timber sales. Eliminate or reform the dietary guidelines. The USDA, in collaboration with HHS, publishes the dietary guidelines every 5 years. For more than 40 years, the federal government has been releasing dietary guidelines, and during this time, there has been constant controversy due to questionable recommendations and claims regarding the politicization of the process. In the 2015 Dietary Guidelines process, the influential Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee veered off mission and attempted to persuade the USDA and HHS to adopt nutritional advice that focused not just on human health, but on the health of the planet. Issues such as climate change and sustainability infiltrated the process. Fortunately, the 2020 process did not get diverted in this manner. However, the dietary guidelines remain a potential tool to influence dietary choices to achieve objectives unrelated to the nutritional and dietary well-being of Americans. There is no shortage of private sector dietary advice for the public, and nutrition and dietary choices are best left to individuals to address their personal needs. This includes working with their own health professionals. As it is, there is constantly changing advice provided by the government, with insufficient qualifications on the advice, oversimplification to the point of miscommunicating important points, questionable use of science, and potential political influence. The dietary guidelines have a major impact because they not only can influence how private health providers offer nutritional advice, but they also inform federal programs. School meals are required to be consistent with the guidelines. The next administration should work with lawmakers to repeal the dietary guidelines. The USDA should help lead an effort to repeal the dietary guidelines. They just say the same thing twice. Minimally, the next administration should reform the dietary guidelines. The USDA, with HHS, should develop a more transparent process that properly considers the underlying science and does not overstate its findings. It should also ensure that the dietary guidelines focus on nutritional issues and do not veer off mission by focusing on unrelated issues such as the environment that have nothing to do with nutritional advice. Are they really saying that the environment has nothing to do with the food we eat? Are they really saying that? They're really saying that. In fact, if environmental concerns supersede or water down recommendations for human nutritional advice, the public would be receiving misleading health information. The USDA, working with lawmakers, should codify these reforms into law. This is so vague, and now you know why we've got crazy pants, heroin addict, worm-eating brain in charge of HHS right now. Because he knows how to say things to Trump that makes him believe that he is following Project 2025. They're so basic. Organizational issues. Based on the recommended reforms identified as ideal solutions, the USDA would look different in many respects. One of the biggest changes would be a USDA that is not focused on welfare, given that means-tested welfare programs would be moved to HHS. The Food and Nutrition Service that administers the food and nutrition programs would be eliminated. The Farm Service Agency, which administers many of the farm subsidy programs, would be significantly smaller in size if the ideal farm subsidy reforms were adopted. More important, a conservative USDA, as envisioned, would not be used as a governmental tool to transform the nation's food system, but instead would respect the importance of efficient agricultural production and ensure that the government does not hinder farmers and ranchers from producing an abundant supply of safe and affordable food. Well, that's a joke right now, huh? From worms in our beef to lettuce that makes you poo all over the place. For a conservative USDA to become a reality, and for it to stay on course with the mission as outlined, the White House must strongly support these reforms and install strong USDA leaders. These individuals almost certainly will be faced with opposition from some in the agricultural community who would fight changing subsidies in any fashion, although many of the reforms would likely be embraced by those in agriculture. There would be strong opposition from environmental groups and others who want the federal government to transform American agriculture to meet their ideological objectives. Finally, there would be opposition from the left of center groups who do not want to reform SNAP and would expand welfare and dependency, such as through universal free school meals, as opposed to reducing dependency. Reducing the scope of government and promoting individual freedom may not always be easy, but it is something that conservatives regularly should strive for. The listed reforms to the U.S. Department of Agriculture would help to accomplish these objectives and are well worth fighting for to achieve a freer and more prosperous nation. Conclusion. This chapter started with a discussion of the incredible success of American farmers and American agriculture in general. This is how the chapter should close as well. Americans are blessed with an agricultural sector and a food system in general, which are worthy of incredible respect. A conservative USDA should appreciate this while recognizing that its role is to serve the interests of all Americans, not special interests. By being a champion of unleashing the potential of American agriculture, a conservative USDA would help to ensure a future with an abundant supply of safe and affordable food for individuals and families in the United States and across the globe. Author's note. The author would like to thank all the contributors for their assistance, expertise, and insight into the development of this chapter. In addition, special thanks are due to Rachel Wilfong, who was instrumental in getting the chapter ready for submission. Then there's a bunch of endnotes, cite a bunch of different things, some of which might be true, some of which look to be websites I've never heard of. Fast.org, whatever that is. Could be legitimate, I don't know. I don't have time to look at every single one of these citations. There are 80, 90, 96, 97. Remember in previous episodes I was complaining they don't cite anything? This one has 128 citations. That's another 2 hours on its own if you looked every one of those up. Alright, taking a break. The next section is called Department of Education. We're on section 11. If you're following in the book proper, that is page 319. This recording and all other recordings related to this Project 2025 reading are copyrighted by Douglas Wayne Ricketts. All rights reserved. Unless you agree with me that Project 2025 sucks, then please feel free to use as much of this reading as you want. Thanks for listening.